The laws are really hard to enforce, and then retaliation is really effective against people. Like something like 80% of whistleblowers experience retaliation at work. So you might be that 1 in 5 who doesn't go down for this, but the number of stories you hear about the number of organizations that go after people for blowing the whistle in ways like this, it's viewed as a threat. You're not going to get a fair hearing.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, North University Park Edition. Today, we talk to Zachary Ellison. Zachary is a journalist, a Trojan, and a whistleblower. He spent years at USC as a student and then as a staffer. When he saw something was wrong, he called it out and was summarily terminated. He also closely watches local politics and convincingly intertwines the two. He also knows a bunch about the neighborhood that encompasses USC in South Central, so let's welcome Zachary. Hey everybody, we are here with Zachary Ellison.
Hey!
Zachary is a writer and would you call yourself an activist?
Activist and a journalist.
And a journalist.
And a whistleblower.
And a whistleblower who spent many years working at USC, and that's where you blew the whistle.
Correct.
Well, let's just get right into it. What did you blow the whistle on? Does USC need a whistle blown on them? It seems like they have enough scandals that are just coming out. Did they?
Yes.
They do. They need whistleblowers.
Yes.
Okay.
There's always the story that gets out, right? And then there's the inside story of what's happening. And I mean, perhaps the USC's had a number of scandals, and in fact, it's almost become scandalized in a lot of ways. And certainly one of the things you hear people talk about is how many scandals the USC has and how they can't keep track of them. Mm-hmm. But if you were there and you lived through that time and you did so in a pretty high position like I did, you learned a lot of very interesting things about USC and about the city of Los Angeles too.
What years were you at USC?
I was a graduate student and student worker from 2013 to 2015, and then there was a gap, and then I went to work for USC from October of 2015 to August of 2022.
Oh, up until recently. What were your jobs at USC?
I was, as a student worker, I worked for the USC Good Neighbors campaign in university relations, which fundraises from USC staff and faculty to support university community partnership programs.
So you would call up alumni and say, we need money?
We would target mostly the faculty and the staff. We would do newsletter. Predominantly, I'd send out emails to 16,000 faculty and staff. We would that's a principal form of fundraising, and then it usually raised about $1 million plus a year that we would direct towards community programs.
So you would write current staff and faculty?
Correct.
And shake them down for money to give back to their
Correct.
employer?
It came out of the 1992 Rodney King riots, actually. USC decided to do something different. So USC's solution was to do kind of its own United Way program, but just for the neighborhoods around both University Park campus and then over in Boyle Heights to around the Health Sciences campus over there as well.
Interesting. All right, so you would shake down the staff for $1 million a year.
Yep.
And whenever you got donations off of your newsletters, your bosses would say, great job, man.
Yep.
All right. So what else did you do over there?
I went to work for the Office of the Provost in 2015.
I went to UC Santa Barbara.
Yep.
I don't know what a provost is.
A provost is the second highest ranking officer of the university. He is the senior vice president for academic affairs. He's essentially the chief academic officer, and his job is to oversee the operation of the university and campus life too as well.
And so what typical duties did you have supporting him?
I was assigned to support the vice provost for academic operations. So my job was very focused on nuts and bolts, hiring deans, reviewing them, bringing unique programs to USC, supporting partnership programs, veterans programs. We did a great program with the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. I helped build a biomedical sciences building. I coordinated literally all of the construction meetings. And then, of course, USC has made various reform efforts over the years to try to address its scandals. So I was smack dab in the middle of a lot of that.
The provost had to help smooth that out?
Correct.
Okay.
It really goes back to 2016 was kind of really when it started going sideways with Carmen Puyo-Fido, the former dean of the School of Keck Medicine, who infamously got caught using drugs and had a mistress and unfortunately an infant who died.
Not only did he do drugs, but according to Paul Pringle's book Bad City, he provided her
Correct.
with a bunch of drugs. Even after she overdosed in Pasadena, he would bring drugs to her at rehab.
And he was able to get into LA County Jail to go visit people like this, too. It's certainly something that's never been fully investigated, how he was able to access a facility like that.
It's crazy.
Like crazy. and so big hot water for USC. And so I volunteered to help support the president of the Academic Senate and the president of the USC Staff Assembly in leading the Reform Task Force, which was called the Task Force on Workplace Standards and Employee Wellness. Nothing opaque there. But it was a group of faculty and staff who began looking at ways that we could better monitor doctors, ensure better communications, ensure people had better reporting options to go to. And then, of course, George Tyndall happened. The infamous gynecologist at the USC Student Health Center, who has allegedly abused thousands of women. And
Well, is it still alleged? I mean, didn't USC have to pay out like a billion bucks?
USC paid out over $1.1 billion in legal settlements over the course of two settlements. But to date, not a single person has gone to jail. George Tyndall is not on trial even.
I didn't know that.
Correct. He is still in preliminary hearings.
He's a free man.
He is still a free man. He has been out on bail on bond since I believe 2020. He was arrested in June of 2019 by the LAPD. Originally, I believe it was 23 felony charges relating to sexual abuse, and then they added 12 more for a total of 35 felonies.
Okay, so SC paid off all these victim women, these alleged, I guess we have to say, these alleged victims.
They didn't admit any fault.
Has SC said anything nasty about him?
Rick Caruso has been very critical of George Tyndall. During the campaign, he would say that George needed to go to jail right away, very insistently.
All right.
I mean, Rick obviously morally did not approve of what happened. I don't think anybody should have, but the legal defense mechanism of the university to try to avoid holding people accountable for ignoring these reports, and then to try to limit the payout and the reach of the story has really continued into overdrive. And I mean, I don't like hearing from victims that they're concerned that the criminal justice system is failing them here, but I don't think they're insane. One of the first things that happened after George Tyndall was then District Attorney of Los Angeles County, Jackie Lacey, went to USC. And she met with then interim President Wanda Austin. And in fact, there's even a picture you can still see of them together on Twitter saying what a good relationship USC has with the district attorney's office. And so victims have pointed to this, as proof that Jackie Lacey, who was also a USC alum, had a conflict of interest and sought to downplay and slow the gravity of the charges and the process. And I wish I was getting a different vibe from George Gascon, totally. I have been bugging his spokesman for the dates and to try to get some clarification about what's happened. But there were no preliminary hearings that took place between June of 2022 and November of 2022. The preliminary hearings stopped for that entire period around the election, and then they restarted in December of 2022, and now they're continuing.
Is George a Trojan as well?
George was not a Trojan, if I recall.
Should we believe that Trojan alum will be loyal to their college? I mean, I love UCSB, but if somebody did something terrible,
It's been very
do my job.
painful for the USC community to endure this. I, for one, know people who've been personally victimized by him, who I worked with as a student, and I've gone to parties and I encounter people who are victims there too. And to the extent that accepted that there was some responsibility, at least for the university, to make the changes that it agreed to with the government. Laser focused on that resolution agreement with the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights after it was concluded in February of 2020, which was right before the pandemic hit.
I'm impressed how well you are with these dates.
Yes.
Listeners, he's got no notes in front of him. He's just speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you believe that Lacey was being loyal to USC by not prosecuting this dude?
I do. I think that they have tried to slow the process down.
Because in your theory, because she doesn't want USC to seem tarnished? Isn't SC already been tarnished for years and years and years?
They have gotten some of it is fun, the legal interest of the university. The idea that if they were to admit fault, to hold people accountable, that there might be somebody other than George Tyndall who would need to be held to account, I think scares them.
But isn't paying out $1 billion admitting fault to the average dude?
And in news terms, it is. Mm-hmm. But in legal terms, as far as issuing, they have issued President Folt, bless her heart, has issued very opaque apologies. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the victims feel that until George Tyndall is actually convicted of a crime and is put into jail, that justice has not been served, and money alone is not enough for that. It's hard to describe the harm that a sexual abuse scandal like that happens, but I've seen, a professor have to force himself to go back to serving on a faculty committee after he learned that his daughter was victimized to participate in that process. And when you watch somebody have to pull themselves together like that, it remains with you. I saw the nurse who was the whistleblower who did blow the whistle on George Tyndall, Cindy Gilbert, come down and meet with then Provost Michael Quick and try to desperately explain not only had she tried to repeatedly report George, but they had investigated him twice officially in 2013 and then again in 2016 through the university's Office of Equity and Diversity, which is its Title IX office. USC then commissioned an outside medical review in 2016 that concluded that much of what George Tyndall was doing was out of practice.
Let's rewind just a little bit. And some of these allegations are he took inappropriate photos of women's
Correct.
genitalia. He refused to allow nurses to be behind the curtain with him as he did stuff to these.
This is correct.
And he seemed to have targeted women who were let's say, not necessarily familiar with how American medical stuff is. So a lot of times they were, I don't want to call them foreigners. What would you call them?
I would say that George Tyndall targeted vulnerable women, particularly non-white women, and then also women from the LGBTQ community. And one thing that we learned after George Tyndall that was a little disturbing was that there was actually a second doctor at the USC Student Health Center, Dr. Dennis Kelly, who was abusing his male patients, and that too was settled. I believe there was 80 plus patients on that who received monetary claims.
Wow.
So at the USC Student Health Center, there were actually 2 doctors engaged in misconduct during this period. And then unfortunately, the medical director, who was the closest supervising doctor at the time, passed away from cancer soon after. His name was Lawrence Neinstein.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you didn't need to blow the whistle on any of these people. Who did you blow the whistle on?
I blew the whistle on the university's Senior Vice President for Human Resources and Vice President for Equal Opportunity in Title IX, who are the 2 officials who were tasked with making the changes as required by the U.S. Department of Education after the agreement was concluded in February 2020. So I had a master's in public administration, and almost then about 5+ years in the provost office, and we'd gone through this. And so I decided that somebody at least needed to monitor the things the university had agreed to change actually changed. And so much of what I saw was inaction. They did make some changes. They hired people, but a lot of the really important outward public-facing things that they needed to do happened very slowly. They didn't make changes to our performance evaluations as employees to give us a better, more direct reporting option through that process. And then I caught them in 2021. There's an email that you're supposed to send out school-wide at the start of every year that's called a Title IX notice that informs you of your federal civil rights as a student in that institution. And USC is required to do this at the beginning of every academic year. And so when we came back from the pandemic in 2021, this did not happen. And I had been a student at USC too, and USC was actually on its second resolution agreement. And this was one of the things they repeatedly failed at. So I blew the whistle internally on that at USC. And then I tried to turn around and report it to the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. And they actually blew me off. The attorney they had assigned to monitor USC didn't want this to come out. The USC had failed to meet a basic requirement of this agreement that's specifically spelled out. And so that precipitated me filing a complaint with the department to try to force them to take action. And I actually even went to the Department of Education Office of Inspector General in October of 2021 to try to report that USC was not doing everything that it needed to do under the agreement. And then the most unimaginable thing happened. People might have forgotten by now, but in 2021, USC had a major scandal over drug-facilitated sexual assaults at fraternity houses. And so this resulted in a lot of pressure on USC and the Department of Education. And it also, there was a piece in the LA Times by one of our faculty members, Ariel Gross, that criticized USC for having a toxic environment. So the combination of, I think, the whistleblower, the student protest, and then faculty resistance led the Department of Education to hold USC to account in January of 2022 for not doing everything it said it was going to do under the agreement. They didn't apologize directly. They don't do that. They sent out an email to the entire university community noting that certain components to review, particularly files, for university employees to ensure that there was no other abuse taking place, had not happened on a timely basis after the agreement. And so at that point, I actually I said to the Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, come on, really? Like, was I really wrong there? And that led to me having a more of a friendly relationship with them.
So when you blew the whistle, you wrote a letter to the Department of Education?
I filed a formal complaint
And
on top of my emails.
And when you did this, you probably assumed, oh, USC is going to get this and be like, whoops, we should have sent out this one letter.
Yeah.
It's for starters. And they never did it?
They did do it. After I reported it, it took them 4 days to do it.
Oh, good.
But they did do it.
So it worked.
Yes.
That part worked.
That part worked.
Well, let me ask you about
I forced
these.
the behavior to the change.
Okay. What other aspects of the agreement had they not completed?
So as part of the agreement, USC agreed to revamp its Equal Opportunity in Title IX office. It actually disbanded the former Office of Equity and Diversity, and it created this new unit called EEOT, Equal Opportunity in Title IX. And it hired a new coordinator whose name is Catherine Spear. And people might not know Catherine Spear, but she was the Title IX coordinator at Stanford during the infamous Brock Turner case.
Oh, was he a water polo guy, volleyball guy?
He was something like that, but
he took a girl behind a dumpster.
Took a girl behind the dumpster. So that's USC's Title IX coordinator. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to work with her very intensively because I was interested in these issues. USC was also supposed to provide reports to the university community on its progress on an annual basis since 2020, and it hasn't issued a single one of those reports. So
are nurses going behind the curtain now with the doctors?
We have. I can't say that for sure. What I can
because you're not allowed back there.
No. My job is to coordinate the university's strategic response to this.
But maybe there could be a form from all these patients where they follow up and say, was there a nurse present?
We have actually improved that. USC has not publicized that there's a university clinical services program that we helped to create that is sort of the non-Keck medicine of USC, monitoring and reporting improvement for medical staff and for clinical staff in general, whether you're a psychologist or an occupational therapist or a dentist. You know, when people make complaints, they need to be acted on, because otherwise, and they need to be acted on with integrity, because certainly one of the issues wasn't just that USC had gotten complaints, that it mishandled the complaints deliberately to avoid having to deal with the story. And even beyond the point of any reason or logic of it.
You were there for a while. Why do you think they just didn't do what they needed to do?
I think that the university's public image and reputation come ahead of everything else there for some people, including human decency. And I have had confrontations with people face to face about these issues inside the senior administration. And that is the response. It is that culture of loyalty, of an unblemished, perfect USC that has become harder and harder to maintain.
Well, it's not maintained.
It's not maintained.
And so, okay.
But they still want it.
Well, who doesn't, though?
Who doesn't?
And so when people or an institution make a mistake, a serious mistake where they have to dole out $1 billion plus,
Correct.
There's two paths you can take. Own up to it and say, this is what we're going to do to fix it. Or ignore it and think that it's going to go away, even though the LA Times is right down the street and has made a living writing stories about USC scandals. This is why it's hard for me to believe that they chose path 2. I'm under the impression these are smart people.
They're very smart people, and they're very well funded, and they're very well resourced with attorneys.
And I also feel like, well, for example, today LeBron's kid decided that he's going to go to SC next year. And so even among all these scandals, people still want to go to USC. I mean, and LeBron's kid could go anywhere, including UCLA, which also is pretty damn good at basketball.
Notoriety, is a form of marketing. I mean, that was certainly one thing we became aware of, was that we thought the scandal would hurt the business reputation of USC as an educational institution. But in fact, it didn't. Applications went up. We had record highs.
Therefore, don't you think wherever the next scandal is, USC will finally say, well, if we own up to it, it's not going to hurt us. In fact, we know it's the right thing to do, but it's not going to hurt us. So therefore, do you think in the next scandal that they'll do the right thing?
I think that I don't think they want necessarily to, I don't think it's a binary. I don't think it's right and wrong. I think it's a complicated calculation of financial and legal risk. And I think when you talk about who USC is, and you talk about who the leaders are there, who define it, one thing, I mean, certainly I noticed was, between former President Max Nikias and what it was like to have to have that culture of the university, and then to have an incident happen like that, and then to have Rick Caruso go from being a trustee to the chair of the board of trustees, he replaced an oil tycoon, but like his interest in the school wasn't necessarily the same. Like the former chairman of the board of trustees of USC, John Mork, and his wife gave $200 million in scholarships to the university. Man. Rick Caruso gave $50 million to Pepperdine while he was chair of USC. So I mean, to the extent that Rick Caruso is a product of USC and he loves it very much, he also looks on it as a reflection of himself in a way that I think is perhaps different than other people who didn't run for mayor with a $100 million campaign. And I think that when you talk about what the response has been as far as the university's intentions, it gets really hard to tell. And one big clue we've gotten, though, that something is amiss was the leaked deposition from that civil case that came up to knock LA back in October of 2022. And there's a very suspicious section where Rick Caruso admits to getting a cell phone call directly from an LAPD captain after the George Tyndall investigation begins. And Rick says that he refers the captain to the USC Office of General Counsel and kind of jokes that he'd gotten a lot of calls from LAPD captains. But it's still not clear how anybody in LAPD gets Rick Caruso's cell phone number.
Well, and also, why call him?
Why call him? And to talk about the investigation by his own admission into George Tyndall.
Why do you think they called him?
I think that is a sign of misconduct from LAPD, because that to me is an inappropriate contact. You don't call if you're an LAPD captain who's in charge of the investigation, you don't call the chair of the institution on the side to have a chat about it. When you're talking about victims who you're supposed to be representing,
because it seems like you're trying to tip off the university on what they're doing, therefore they can build an easier defense.
Correct. Or you're trying to cooperate with them. And what was really disturbing about last October was that we learned soon after that there was in fact an LAPD captain who has helped facilitate the cover-up of sexual assault. Corey Palka, who is currently under internal affairs investigation by LAPD, and the LA Times has reported that the U.S. Attorney's Office Criminal Division Chief Mac Jenkins has joined the probe into Corey Palka. So I have been trying to get LAPD to go on a record about what's going on with this LAPD captain. That Rick Caruso admits under deposition calls his cell phone about the George Tyndall investigation. Because I think people would like to know if somebody in LAPD had tried to slow the investigation in some way to help USC's PR image.
Before we get into the bad of what happened after you blew the whistle, any other good things happen?
I think as far as my sense of self and my sense of soul, at least feeling like I'm not part of something that it wasn't that we wanted any of it. Nobody wanted any of this to happen, but the university's response was so bumbling that whatever mishaps there were before the investigation, USC has deeply apologized for, and so now it's a question of what's happened after this news has come out. And you see like Karen Bass and Gloria Allred doing a whole press conference in the middle of an election season to call for the end of the cover-up of USC sexual abuse. But now neither one of them wants to give any comment on it. Take it what you will. I don't think either of them is being disinterested, but I do think that there are some politics to this and to what stories make the news and stay in the news. Mm-hmm. And certainly, this is one that's fallen out of the news lately, post-election.
News cycles are a blink of the eye these days. And so unless you think that there's something behind all that.
I do think that there is, I do think that Rick Caruso, and his closest political associate, whose name is Sam Garrison, who was his chief of staff at USC and is now the senior vice president for USC, and then the then general counsel of USC at the time, Carol Mach-Amir, did cook up this kind of scheme to damage control USC's reputation and to support Caruso's political ambitions implicitly. Because it was no secret that Rick Caruso wanted to be mayor of Los Angeles. It's something he's talked about for much of his adult life. People have speculated for over and over again that he was going to run before he finally did. So I think that employees will do a lot of things to make their bosses happy. Whether it is bad intentioned, the self-admitted cleanup job that happens has been very hasty and has not led to the resolution of this to anybody's satisfaction.
What was the resolution personally for you once you blew the whistle?
I succeeded in forcing USC to take a federally mandated action, and then I reported it to the regulatory authorities. I mean, one thing people don't realize about whistleblowing is ideally you are doing that sort of action. It's not just leaking something controversial. It is forcing an institution to try to comply with the law. And I got away with it, and I was able to stay. I did not win any fans. I describe an encounter I have with the senior vice president for human resources in December of 2022, where she's literally staring at me, glaring at me, coming out of the president's office after I think the feds came down on USC. And
she glared at you.
She glared at me
because she got caught not doing what the feds told her to do.
Correct. And I think she figured it out that she kind of knew it was me.
But still, you're not the bad person here.
I'm not the bad person, but I'm the person who's making trouble for them. And I
shouldn't somebody do this? Let me ask it this way: do you regret blowing the whistle?
No.
Great.
No.
Did you keep your job?
No. I was able to get more accomplished after that because.
But hold on, did they fire you for this?
It depends who you ask.
I'm asking you.
It's still under investigation. Yes, I believe they did.
How did that go down?
That went down hard on them. It went really bad for them.
For them.
They tried to silence me before firing me. They engaged in some very intimidating legal tactics. The core thing that they tried to intimidate me in a meeting. They literally were threatening me that something was coming to me. And then they went back and they dug up one of my ex-girlfriend's old Title IX complaints that had been resolved from July of 2019. Their solution was to commit invasion of privacy and try to blackmail me with it. They then provided me with a file in response to a personnel file request that they had been, they were like 30 days past the state deadline on. Mm-hmm. And they didn't think that I was going to find this file, that they were going to, in this termination planning, like kind of hell week that they were going to put me through. I ended up walking into the termination proceeding and flipping the termination proceeding on them with the help of a security official in the room who was not in on this scheme to try to threaten me. And it didn't work. I mean, here you've got somebody who they know was a whistleblower, they suspected was an informant, and sure enough, at that point, when somebody commits crime like that against you, it deeply affects you.
But still,
I went in like a raging bull into that room.
Unlike most other whistleblowers that either leak classified documents or something like this, all you did, it seems like to me, was point out they haven't done this. So Correct. It's not like you released anything. And all you said was something hasn't been released.
I updated the school websites to have the correct Title IX office for people to report complaints to. I did it to over a dozen university websites in the months leading to my termination. And I had produced a spreadsheet that documented how many USC schools didn't have diversity pages on them. It was like 6 who had no mention of diversity at all on their website.
Had they had those before?
No, but most of the other schools did, and actually, yes, they did. They had it was totally inconsistent. Some of the schools had on the school webpage what the reporting resources were. Some of them had made updates to change the names as required by the Department of Education, and then some of them hadn't. So I undertook a really coordinated effort in late spring of 2022 to do this, which actually led to a literal stare down between me and the general counsel of USC at a university event after somebody complimented me for doing it. He looked at me like, "What are you doing?" Like,
why is it bad to do what you did?
I figured it out. A month later, USC got in trouble again in June 2022 with U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights. And among these things that they were held accountable for a second time in 2022 were these website updates to provide the correct information for reporting. So that at least if somebody wants to make a complaint about Keck Medicine, that they could go online and find the right information to make a complaint.
And they were mad that you made it easy for people to make complaints.
Correct.
Okay, I can kind of see that, but isn't Isn't that the right thing to have on your website?
When you have information that USC has not complied with such an important agreement like that, and then has gotten in trouble twice with federal agencies in the same year.
Was that part of the agreement that they had to start putting these on the website?
It was.
Ah, okay. So you weren't doing anything above and beyond.
As far as my position, I was only an executive secretary, and you have an entire compliance offices and legal offices at USC that are supposed to be doing these things. And I had even met with these people to try to encourage them over and over again to do the right thing. From the senior vice president of human resources to Catherine Spear, they all knew that I was very interested in this agreement and what was going to happen to it. And so when they finally moved against me, they at the end of the week, they handed me this termination letter that they basically they staged these incidents to try to terrify me, and then wrote a one-sided account of it. But it also includes them describing me as making change inappropriately at the university. Inappropriately. They say that I'd been advised that how you make change at USC matters, and that by going to the government, I guess I had gone too far with them.
So how did it finally go down? They called you in an office.
They called me into a boardroom at 4:30 on a Friday. And I walked in the room. I told them that my cell phone was off and I wasn't recording the conversation. Placed it down and sat down very assertively and told them, "You guys want to talk? Let's talk." And so there was my boss had a prepared statement that he had actually written, and he started to read it. And so I kind of warned him. I was like, "You need to stop this. This is not okay." And so sure enough, they got to fire me after I got shouted down. So I kind of played along with it. And then when they handed me the letter, it was so laughably written that I just kind of burst out laughing at them. It literally has a self-incriminating statement that includes my response to being threatened, but not the threat that was made to me. And then I pivoted the conversation to talk about the dirt file that they had tried to do, because I mean, if you have an informant and you want to threaten somebody, we'll show them you have some dirt on them. It didn't work. The security officer who was next to me, who was a LAPD veteran, a reserve officer and trainer, and is an expert in counter extortion. As he's watching me question them about this, his face is becoming redder and redder and redder at them, because he didn't want anything to do with this type of threat against somebody like me, who was somebody he knew, and who is questioning people who are who are trying to do basically whistleblower retaliation against me. And so it fell apart on them. They didn't expect me to find that file. They gasped. Gasp. And
so while you're being fired, you say, "I know about this file."
Correct.
They freak out, but they go through with the termination.
Yeah, they got to go through with the termination.
Did they give you a severance?
No severance.
2 weeks pay?
They gave me 2 weeks pay. They threw the HR AVP they had. I had never met before in my life. She was next to my supervisor, and she threw the check at me and kind of told me I was going to need it. And then she also threatened me with a uniformed police officer. They tried to tell me that there was a uniformed Department of Public Safety officer outside of the room waiting for me, before she said that USC had so underfunded its Department of Public Safety they didn't have the resources to keep the campus safe. So I mean,
hold on.
Yes, I know.
How much money does USC have in the bank?
USC has probably in the bank reserves of maybe $8 billion.
$8 billion.
Yeah, the operating budget for USC is about $4.8 billion a year, and they've got reserves and
a squad of rent-a-cops.
Sorry,
don't cost no $8 billion.
No.
Okay, so
it was what they describe as a declaratory statement before somebody commits a crime or something like that. Usually they'll say something, right? That it's like, "I'm going to get you," and so that was her statement. She knew she was up to no good, and so it fell apart very quickly at that point.
Did you have to sign anything on that day?
I did not.
Did you get a lawyer right away?
No, I haven't been able to get a lawyer. People are terrified of any type of...
Really?
Yeah, I mean, USC...
There's not a lawyer that wants to fight USC on a
No.
whistleblower termination?
I've talked to a number of them, and even the ones who have taken cases against USC uses very dirty and extreme legal tactics sometimes to try and get out of being held accountable in just about any case. It's almost they've systematized getting out of trouble, and this is something you hear discussed on the infamous LA Fed tapes.
LA Fed tapes are what?
The LA Fed tapes were racist and corrupt.
Oh, these are the 2022 tapes you were talking
Correct.
about earlier, where eventually it got Nuri Martinez to have to resign, and Kevin DeLeon should have resigned, but he
has not.
Hasn't yet. Yes.
Gil Cedillo got timed out,
Right.
and the president of the AFL-CIO, Ron Herrera, resigned.
Why do they call them Fed tapes?
It is after the building, which is known as the LA Fed tapes, I'm sorry, which is known as the LA Fed building.
Okay.
And so they do talk about this, that USC is kind of like an oil company that's committed, like all these crimes, and Gil Cedillo says they have 1,000 lawyers.
This is what Kevin called USC,
Yes.
an oil company.
Yes, and he basically they kind of view USC as this entity that is kind of beyond the reach of anybody, and to some extent, I don't know about that one, but what I do know is that I had observed. I had befriended Rick Caruso's best friend at USC is Sam Garrison, the senior vice president of University Relations. And so I had seen Sam a week prior speaking at the remodeling of the USC Community House. And I knew him. I'd known him since 2018. And he had the strangest look on him. It was like he was on the way to like a murder or something, the way he came down the stairs. And he kind of shot me a look that I'll never forget. And then he gave this, it was a celebratory event. You had members of the community there. And he's standing in front of us and he's speaking, and he's almost like miming that he's like repeating a conversation that he's heard elsewhere. And it was kind of the most condescending possible, briefest way to give a speech like that on the occasion. And so I thought it was suspicious. And given the circumstances of everything that had been happening at USC over the course of that year, and two people I've known who work for him, and my interactions with him, I became concerned that there was something that was going to happen to the election. And so when I flipped the termination proceeding, after we went through the dirt file scheme, I turned the topic to the election. And I actually interrogated Mark Todd, the vice provost for academic operations at USC, on August 26th about if there was going to be some sort of wiretapping or listening device attack happen, and that I would know the source after having observed Sam Garrison that day. And this whole conversation occurs in front of a senior campus safety official at USC, who is himself an expert in counter-extortion. His name is Patrick Prince. And so we were aware that something was coming. We didn't know what it was, but we thought that there was something that he had that he was going to use to fuck with the election. Part of my language. That's exactly what, when a bus...
how did that benefit Caruso?
So it tried to benefit Caruso by boosting this narrative that LA City Hall and LA Labor was corrupt,
right?
And that Latinos are just trying to get power for themselves at the expense of other minority groups. And then Caruso, of course, was really trying to appeal to Latinos. He famously declared that he was Latin. At the first debate right after the tapes, and then his...
Hold on, wait. What was his reasoning behind that?
He wanted to... He was asked, I believe, about his outreach to Latinos in Los Angeles, and so his response was to note that he's Italian, Latin. That's Latin, and. He's denied responsibility for this.
Maybe not everybody who I think is smart is actually smart.
He blames it on Karen Bass, and he said that most of the people in the meeting had endorsed Karen Bass, but it's not even true. Gil Cedillo endorsed Rick Caruso. There's a video of it. Kevin DeLeon never endorsed anybody.
Right.
And in fact, he's got old beef with Karen Bass going back to his assembly days when Kevin got caught shadow voting, casting a vote inconsistent with what another member would wanted as a proxy in relation to a development project. And so Kevin looks like the weak link in this. And it's in.
And by
the
that, do you mean
recording.
that Kevin probably was behind the leak?
I think that Kevin disclosed the meeting was going to happen to Sam Garrison. And this is one great thing about tapes is this is actually in the tape. I have the transcript in front of me. It's
he's got a yellow Post-it. Very few of my guests come prepared.
Yeah.
I literally take my hat off to you.
It's, I've heard Megan Kuneff, the famous legal affairs reporter, talk about federal prosecutions and how if prosecutors have one thing that they love, it's recordings. Because you can extract a significant amount of information from recordings about what led up to the meeting. So the same person that I thought was going to attack the election, and I reported on August 22 during this whistleblower retaliation termination, and I had only made the observation of him the week before, and it just kind of came out of me. Like when you see something like that, and you've been in this high stakes, high pressure situation, you store things away in your mind. But we thought he was going to pop up on the recording and in the note that Sam Garrison, who's a former VP at Caruso affiliated, who is Rick Caruso's chief of staff, who is known to be extremely close to Rick Caruso. You can see there's a really elite fancy club in downtown LA called the California Club. And they held an event there 4 months before the election where Sam Garrison and Rick Caruso get up and they laud Mike Bone, the athletic director, over the hiring of Lincoln Riley. So you can start to get an idea of how close Garrison is to Caruso. And so on the recording at 13:44, Garrison appears. They're talking about USC scandals. And the conversation is between Nuri Martinez, the former city council president, and Kevin De Leon. Kevin De Leon he switches the subjects very rapidly. He goes, I didn't realize until after I was with Gene Block from UCLA yesterday, and we were at this event for the Chinese massacre for UCLA. When the LA Times gets a bug up their ass, they just so I talked to Sam Garrison the other day, who is the GR. He reports directly to Carol Folt, who's the president of USC. Kevin says, he was telling me, and Nuri Martinez interrupts him, and she goes, the son of Jim Garrison? And Nuri Martinez knows that Sam Garrison is the youngest son of Jim Garrison from JFK conspiracy theory fame, who, if you ever saw the movie JFK by Oliver Stone, is the attorney who was leading these supposed investigations into if the mafia and the CIA had killed JFK and if it was some type of conspiracy. So Sam is his youngest son, and Nuri knows this. And so Kevin De Leon confirms, yeah, the son of Jim Garrison. He told me a couple of reporters got Pulitzer Prizes, and this confuses Nuri Martinez. She asks him again, from the investigation? And Kevin goes, from the investigation. So what they're doing has legs. Just keep it going. Just keep it going. And this must really freak Nuri Martinez out because she seems worried that Rick Caruso is going to get her or something. And so Nuri Martinez flips out on David Zonizer of the LA Times. And she goes, David Z told me last week, I didn't want to talk to him. I was like, I don't want to get cornered in this shit. But what do you want? He's like, and the feds are leaking shit to David so that he can write it up. That little fucking piece of shit. And he's like, I just wanted you to know, did you know that there's more incriminating evidence against Mark? I said, no. How would I know? As a matter of fact, I don't want to know. So I'll talk to you later. She laughs, cackling. And she goes, I felt uncomfortable with this conversation. So I don't know why you're telling me this shit. I'm like, and she then gets interrupted and they change the subject. And so this is kind of the end cap of the first 15 minutes of the meeting, which is about the Mark Ridley Thomas federal bribery investigation. And then the next day, after this meeting occurred on October 18 of 2021, they would vote to remove Mark Ridley Thomas from city council. So it seems that Sam Garrison might have had some idea from this conversation that this meeting might have been happening because he talks to Kevin De Leon. And then Kevin De Leon misrepresents kind of what the purpose of the conversation is. Because when he says, yeah, the son of Jim Garrison, he told me a couple of reporters got Pulitzer Prizes. It doesn't make any sense. He's not talking about the LA Times investigation there. I think he's talking about endorsements, and I think that's what he talked about with Sam Garrison, was the mayoral campaign in October of 2021. Because I mean, it's no secret that Kevin De Leon is a very ambitious guy. It's no secret that Rick Russo was a very ambitious guy. Kevin came off of a Senate campaign, ran for city council, and then he ran for mayor. So like obviously like there's this backroom conversation happening between these two, but it's just the fishiest thing. And then Sam Garrison is also the only person who connects the note too as well.
Here's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Are you still trying to find a lawyer to help you recoup from being fired for blowing the whistle on USC?
Yes.
Because maybe we can help.
I mean, maybe we can.
I mean, if I'm let's pretend. See, I don't believe this. And again, I'm naive, but I don't believe that just because you're from a college that you defend the college in your adulthood, even when you know that they're doing stupid things. But let's pretend you are for a second. There's not a UCLA lawyer or a Bruin who has a degree from that law school,
Lawyers.
LMU or Notre Dame, like a rival of USC who wouldn't love to give USC a hard time. And probably because it seems to me that USC does make settlements.
Yes, they do.
And so the lawyer doesn't have to go to trial for this. They're probably not going to go to trial. Who would go to trial over this? They're going to look terrible. They're going to end up giving you $8 billion. So it's still hard for me to believe that there's not a lawyer out there who looks at this as an ambulance and would love to chase it.
I think, well, it goes into recoverability. So USC is not happy with me. They're not happy with the whistleblowing I did before I got fired, and they're not happy with me finding things like this in a transcript like that.
Too bad.
And so it overwhelms. What I found is that the attorneys get overwhelmed.
Well, let me ask you this.
They get worried about their money.
Did USC ever say that you were wrong? That the information that you provided was incorrect?
No.
Then pay up, bros.
They
You fired a whistleblower. That's against the law,
this
right?
has stopped being about money and it started being about the law, unfortunately. I'll actually be meeting with over phone with two agents from the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights this Wednesday to talk about USC's investigation into all of this, which is has been ongoing. They, of course, are trying to get out of it, and especially once they realize that I didn't show up with a lawyer, they've kind of realized that they can get out of this.
That you didn't show up to your termination meeting.
I didn't show up to the investigation meetings with a lawyer.
Were you supposed to?
You can get an attorney as an advisor, and really it's kind of a show of force, because otherwise there's nothing to stop them from pushing you around as a private citizen. I mean, to the extent that legal representation is about money, lawyers certainly like it when a client has a retainer, especially when it's a complex case like this. It's going to take a lot of time up front.
I see.
That seems to be the stumbling block there. So that's part of the reason why I've come more forward with the story is because I've tried to get USC to investigate this misconduct, and I'm not satisfied with what I'm seeing as far as they're interested in at least pitting an end to the kind of dirt filing practice that's going on there. And I'm not the only person to have reported this. In October 2020, in July of 2020, one of their own attorneys from their Office of Professionalism and Ethics bolted, and she accused them of engaging in exactly these types of manipulative legal tactics to intimidate people, and she sued them in federal court. She got forced out of court and is now into arbitration. But what I was certainly looking into on the down low while I was still inside USC is this true? Does USC really blackmail its employees to quiet them? Because the report was that there was like a university hit team, and the academic senate, the faculty group, had demanded an investigation, but nothing came up during the pandemic. So I was looking into these rumors, and sure enough, man, they are true. Do do not mess around with USC is my warning to people. They will really go after you very aggressively. And I'd heard it too from another employee too, that they had essentially used pressure tactics on her prior to terminating her. USC doesn't do severance actually by policy. But one thing they're really interested in not seeing happen after George Tyndall is anybody coming forward to speak out. To the best of my knowledge, other than the initial whistleblower, I am the only other employee to ever go to any type of media to try to tell any of the story. Everybody else has been quiet, and certainly the environment and the feelings of fear there. That if you were to speak out about, whether it's what happened at the Student Health Center or if it's the legal cover-up, that you will be retaliated against exactly as I've experienced.
Have you reached out to the LA Times?
I have.
No, you weren't interested in the story?
We've been trying to get USC to investigate this, and of course it doesn't seem to be happening, unfortunately. Even with this, getting people who are, at least you would hope, are the adults in the room there to go forward with it. So we're kind of at a precipice with that. Either I'm going to tell the truth to the feds on Wednesday.
Great.
Either something's going to happen here. It's going to start becoming more public.
We're almost at the end of our hour.
Oh, perfect.
How smooth are you?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Hey,
okay.
I'm the only person in LA who can connect the same person to both the note and the recordings.
And who's that person?
Sam Garrison, Rick Caruso's former chief of staff and the SVP of University Relations at USC.
Let me ask you about University Park.
Yes.
The neighborhood that you worked at for how long?
About 9 years total.
9 years, and you were also a student there.
Correct.
Tell me about it.
I really love University Park. There's a lot of people, particularly around the construction of the USC Village, who felt that USC was gentrifying them out. To the extent that some of it's unavoidable, right? Everything's becoming more expensive in LA.
Let's again. Not everybody knows about University Park.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the Village.
The Village.
The Village used to be more of. It looked more like the neighborhood. It looked like just a. I don't want to say a strip mall, but there was movie theaters there. It just looked like a regular park.
And a Superior grocery.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to denigrate Superior grocery, but it's not Trader Joe's, which they have now.
Correct.
And what they did was it feels to me from an outsider that they just wiped out that whole thing, built their own fake brick building, because those aren't bricks.
No, it's not real brick.
And is it gentrifying? They put a Target there. They put a whole Trader Joe's.
It's the only Trader Joe's in South Los Angeles. You can look at the map of Trader Joe's. There's not a single other one in South LA.
Which is bad on Trader Joe's. But it makes sense there. These are young people who obviously love Trader Joe's, and as they should. So anyhow, when you look at it today, it fits. It totally fits into the aesthetic of SE. But when you knew what it was before, I think those critics are correct, don't you?
I think that the old Village was not didn't have viable long-term viable vibe. Like
people didn't shop there.
I think the Superior Grocery was successful, but the only other business there that's been able to hang on is the Cobbler, who's excellent and actually does like theater clothes for USC.
Well, this is great. A critic of USC is complimenting what they did with the village.
I think that, when you're talking about a 30 or 40-year-old shopping center, that everything had a lifespan. Now, I'm not happy with the village as far as it doesn't have anywhere for public events to occur. Like, they don't so much of, they don't do any farmers markets there. There's no public stage. I mean, is it good that USC built more housing for students? Yeah, of course it is, because that means fewer students competing in the neighborhood for rent. And then too, less of the private developers, because there's a lot of private development companies who literally co-opt USC's colors to try to really rack up student housing. And so, I mean, I think the university did what it had to do with that. Right. And I guess it shows that I'm actually a complex person, right?
Or you're just an honest person.
Yeah, I'm an honest person.
If it's raining, you say it's raining. If it's not, you say it's not.
I would like to see USC do more with the village. There's a community room there that's totally underutilized. They were going to build even more student housing on top of the remaining green space there. And unfortunately, that plan came to a halt. And then too, if you really want to talk development too in University Park, what's been on the LA City Council's agenda this year is the Bethune Library site on Vermont and 36. And Marriott wants to build a hotel there, which is totally insane. That one I'm against.
36 is near where?
It's right across from the Taco Bell on Vermont and 36. It's kind of the west entrance of USC, and that's really the west area and this area south have really been where you've been seeing more students moving into over the last decade. Because USC has always been there, right? USC's been there since 1880. The university the university was there, and the community has really come around it. So I don't think it's it's a question of USC has a belonging there. Obviously they belong. Obviously the city needs a great institution like this, but it's also incumbent upon the institution to treat people fairly and then to provide benefits to the community. Because they're the largest private employer in the county.
USC is.
USC is.
How about that?
Far and away. Outside of government, USC as a private organization employs more people in LA County than anybody else.
Am I being unfair when I feel like, since they've been there since the 1800s, and they have $8 billion in the bank, that the neighborhood hasn't benefited from USC? Is it their job for the surrounding neighborhood to benefit? Because it doesn't look great anywhere around there.
They have studied this, actually. The Advancement Project, which is now known as Catalyst California, did a report back in 2015 that's known as the State of the Neighborhood Report. And what they found was that USC did have some positive impacts, particularly in schooling, on the local schools, through programs like Good Neighbors Campaign and then the USC Family of Schools. Neighborhood Academic Initiative, great program. If you live around University Park campus, you can get educational support for your student and your family, to support the parents from middle school through high school. And then if you get into USC, they will give those students a full scholarship.
Really?
So the number one feeder high school into USC is actually Fauché High School in South Los Angeles because of this program.
Well, I know a little bit about that high school.
Yes.
That's an amazing high school.
It's a good one.
They make the parents show up on Saturdays and sit in there for hours and hours.
That's the Saturday Academy for the Neighborhood Academic Initiative. So, I think when you talk about USC, you're talking about people with a very complex agenda.
Okay, so that's one of the positives.
Yeah.
It's still so bad in that neighborhood that they let the students have free Lyft rides so that they can go up to, I think, 3 miles of the campus. Not 3 miles, maybe 1 mile around the campus, because people are getting murdered there. There's crime like crazy. That's what I'm saying. Yes, it's great that they're... What you mentioned is actually very good.
Yeah.
But when you drive through USC, it doesn't look like this school has been here over 100 years and has given back to the hood.
They could be giving back more. Right. I absolutely do think that there is lots of room for growth for USC to do more for the community there. I mean, I think as far as the lift rides, yes, you're talking about some safety issues, particularly. It started out, it was supposed to be a supplemental service to the normal campus cruiser program, which was student run and operated through USC Transportation. And then they kind of expanded it out, and then it has become, well, who's paying for this? So now they've stopped the exclusive rides, and now it's shared rides only.
Don't you think the students are paying for it though?
Through the tuition, they are.
Exactly. They're not free.
They're not. It's not totally free, and I don't think it's totally out of fear of the neighborhood exactly either. And
Oh,
I
you
do
don't?
think that there are legitimate crime concerns. Like one thing I'll say, event that happened, that was really saddening. Last May was one thing I noticed is that USC has not done a very good job of maintaining the blue phones. Those safety crisis phones that they have. That are supposed to be there to help you. And so I had noticed, particularly, there was one behind the Galen Center right there next to the train tracks, and the security lights were out on the outside of the building too. And sure enough, man, I tried reporting that in. I reported it in facilities. I even went to transportation. I had transportation call DPS to say, hey, there's a blue light, there's a blue light phone out, and the security lights are out in the back of the Galen Center. And a student was attacked, and she was sexually assaulted and raped behind that building. So, I mean, that's a terrible feeling when you're the person who's reporting that the safety features that are supposed to be there to keep the premises safe aren't working, and then something happens to to that student, right? And so, I mean, I do think that Los Angeles, particularly about USC, I think the more that people view themselves as hosting the university and as the university being an integral part of it, the better the relationship will be and the more benefits will go both ways. Are we out of time?
Yeah, and Jordan's going to be mad at me, but I've got two more questions for you. You mentioned earlier about the fraternities.
Correct.
Earlier this year, and to me, this encompasses part of this neighborhood. Frat Row. Where's that? 28th Street?
28th Street.
These frats were pressured by USC to stop allowing freshmen to rush.
Correct.
And the frats, for the most part, didn't blink. And they were like, fine, we don't need you then.
No,
they went on with their business. So
some of them have even disaffiliated.
Right.
After they sued us, and they published full-page ads in the student newspaper declaring that they were suing us.
Do you think that USC bungled this? This is why I ask.
Yes.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, before the internet, it might have been important to have your flyer rush ZZZ on a campus wall. But now, in the age of social media, you don't need to advertise with the campus. In fact, if I'm an 18-year-old boy, I might like the rebellious nature of the frat because that's kind of what the culture is over there. You join the frat so that you can play Animal House a little bit. And so what better than to have the stodgy private institution say, we don't like you. Good. Isn't that awesome?
I think that they really bungled the response to the fraternity house sexual assault scandal that happened in October of 2022.
What should they have done?
I'm sorry, 2021. The headline of that came out that USC wanted like hall monitors to make sure that nobody was sexually assaulting anybody else in the fraternity house. And I mean, it's sad that we even got to that point.
Right.
And then part of the reason too, that USC did take action against fraternities was because of deaths due to alcohol poisoning. And there was a visiting student from Berkeley who ended up running onto the 10 freeway. That's never been explained. There was an Navy ROTC student
pretty
who
far
killed
away.
himself inside the fraternity house. So, I mean, as far as the hazing issues and those safety issues, of course the university has to respond to them. Nobody wants to feel like they sent their kid off to college to party and then he died wrongly.
Or that their daughter's getting roofied.
So, I mean, this is something we've dealt with year after year there, was those issues. I personally was never a member of a fraternity. I've never gone to a fraternity party. In fact, I even went to a college that had no fraternities or sororities, a little tiny Reed College up in Portland, Oregon.
How about that?
And I don't think that it's essential to school for that to happen. I mean, I think you get into some more complicated questions when you start talking about the tailgates. The tailgating that happened, and USC has cracked down on drinking games, and then they have. You can't have any drinking games at USC since 2014, and the reason is because so many alcohol poisonings have occurred. And I actually have stopped going to them. I got tired of watching people getting carted off with alcohol poisoning.
It seems to me that that area, University Park, is this neighborhood, only has a couple.
University Park.
I'm sorry?
They call it North University Park now.
Well, where's South?
It's been obliterated by the Coliseum.
Oh.
Expo Park.
It seems to me that there's really only 2 bars that you can drink at. There's the 9-0, and then on the other side, there is that, I forget what it's called, but it's got like white picket grading on it.
You're thinking about the 2-9? It used to be the 2-9, and then it became Study Hall?
That's the one.
Yeah, they used to have the original Wahoo's fish tacos in there too back in the day.
Really?
Seriously?
Are those really the only 2 places that a 21-year-old could drink?
Around USC?
Outside of like an actual restaurant?
I think that's where you see the fraternity houses getting in the buses on Friday night and going to the clubs.
And that's what I'm asking.
I mean,
is don't you think it would be better for USC to allow some?
I think that's a social question of the drinking age.
But you've got thousands of kids.
We also have the lab, which is next to the Galen
right.
Center, and then they have Traditions, Tradies, which is underground at USC, and it used to be the original campus bar.
So there's a couple places to drink. I guess what I'm suggesting is maybe give the adults who go to USC, because there's a bunch. I mean, when I transferred to UC Santa Barbara, I transferred as a 21-year-old. And, I was incredibly popular with my ID, let me say that. But I think one of the reasons that people go to frat houses is because it's one of the few places they can drink.
And it's a party, right? It's fun.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying maybe maybe expand it. You don't like this. Oh, he's going to
I mean, I think it's not the university's choice.
Yes, but still, if you know that there's this terrible culture, which is including the Greeks, what can you as a university do about it?
They tried, man. They banned freshmen from rushing, which was a financial hit to fraternities and sororities, and then they created a series of complex rules about what you had to do to host a party.
Did some of the fraternities agree to these rules?
Some of them have, I believe,
because they wanted to be affiliated with SC.
Yeah, and I certainly, the administration's argument has been that by keeping your affiliation, you show that you're a safe fraternity, right?
Right. And
that you're willing to work with the university. So I do think ultimately it's going to backfire on those fraternities who are disaffiliated from the university. Mm-hmm. I think that they are going to have incidents happen. And I think that they're going to be even more on their own in dealing with that. And, I think that those national organizations that control those entities need to take more of a step forward, at least trying to ensure that the parents of those students know what's going on. Because it literally can't just be, it's not another stage of boarding school. It's not, it can't just be where you go to get your box checked, right? You're supposed to be there for school.
Right. Okay, let's wrap up with this.
Yeah.
Mr. Whistleblower.
Go for it.
What's your advice to the next whistleblowers out there? What have you learned that you want to share?
I think for the next whistleblowers, 1, document everything. 2, if you're going to go out and try to whistleblow, expect that something like this is going to happen to you. You're probably going to get fired. Nobody goes after the jugular like I did and gets away with it. And then
nobody.
Like
whistleblowers get fired.
Whistleblowers get fired.
Isn't there a law against that?
Yes, there are. The laws are really hard to enforce, and then retaliation is really effective against people. Like something like 80% of whistleblowers experience retaliation at work. Mm-hmm. So you might be that 1 in 5 who doesn't go down for this, But the number of stories you hear about the number of organizations that go after people for blowing the whistle in ways like this, it's viewed as a threat. You're not going to get a fair hearing.
So expect the worst.
Expect the worst.
So if you're going to do it, you better be doing it for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
Which in your case was
protect my community. Try to protect USC. Make sure they're putting at least the reporting resources out there. And then, two, send a big message to the senior administration that not everybody is just going to go in lockstep when they don't meet up to their obligations. And, like, if I go down for having tried to provide the correct information for people to report sexual assaults and discrimination, in their schools, and for getting a Title IX notice out, like, I was fine with that. The victims of George Tyndall are people I know. They're people's faces I see, at night. And I don't take it lightly. And money wasn't enough. It's not just enough to arrest him and keep him in some form of pretrial detention for 4 years. He's got to go to jail. And then the rest of the cover-up, as far as who knew what when, needs to start eroding. It can't stay secret forever. And I hope that maybe by speaking out that I'll convince somebody else to speak out with me. And so, I think that'd be the final thing, is if you're going to whistleblow, ideally you know other whistleblowers too, right? And you have some plan at least to corroborate your story, because otherwise you just sound like a crazy person, and that's what they'll try to do to you, to discredit you. They'll try to say he's acting, he's crazy, he's just imagining things. But at a certain level, it gets hard to fake documents and things like that. So that's why I brought my paperwork today, because hey, I'm the only person who can connect the same person to the note in the recordings with the LA Fed tapes.
Some of what we talked about may have gone over the heads of some people, but if they want to follow up on this, you've been documenting this very well in your Substack.
Yep.
What's your Substack?
My Substack is zachary.ellison.substack.com. The username is Zachary Obama, and you can find me under Zachary Obama on Twitter as well.
Why Obama?
Because I think Obama, as the last legitimate president of the United, you're totally legitimate.
Dark Brandon isn't your friend?
No, I can't. After it went off the rails after Trump, and now we're just in damage control. But I mean, Obama was from Hawaii. He was a constitutional law professor. So many of the ethics and integrity issues, they can't even get near him.
You say Hawaii because you've spent time there.
I lived in Hawaii. I love Hawaii.
Right. Substack. Zachary what now?
ZacharyEllison.substack.com. And
you're on Twitter. Because that's how we met each other. Yeah. What's your Twitter handle?
At Zachary Obama. It's easy to remember, isn't it?
It is easy to remember. Has anybody given you a hard time about this?
Oh yes, of course, from left and right, and I think that's part of the beauty at it, because if you're gonna be the person, right, who one is dealing with one of the most infamous institutions in the city, who reports an attack on the election in specific details with who they think is going to do it, what means they're going to use for it, and then you're going to come forward with this story, you better have some evidence. Mm-hmm. And so I have been very strategically working with other journalists to try to move forward this story of who is the source of the LA Fed tapes, because to me, it's been terrible watching the city try to tear itself apart over this.
Okay, real quick. I've heard Hugo. I've now heard KDL. Is there anybody on this list of reasonable suspects?
The LA Magazine also had listed Mark Ridley Thomas and Jose Huizar. None of them did it. I have some confidence that it's Sam behind it, Sam Garrison.
All right, well,
I've got him on the note and on the tape, and this is the beauty of journalism in America, is that when somebody puts out something on the internet, and there's literally nothing else that the LAPD has that I don't. They executed search warrants on the accounts. There's no information on the accounts that were used that's going to help them catch this person. You have to look at the evidence itself. And so I have used classic legal investigation techniques here to analyze this. I have a pivotal moment in the recording. I've got my person there, and then I've got the note too as well. And the Sam Garrison connection to the note is really incredible.
Well, Zachary,
yeah,
you have been incredible.
Oh, thank you.
May I say thanks, Obama?
Yes.
But But more specifically, thanks, Zach.
And as our leaker says about his old boss, Martin Ludlow at the LA Fed, who was resigned from the city council in 2006, remember him. That's what he says. It's the sole question in the note is about this guy, Martin Ludlow, who most people don't even remember, but who was at the center of the last LA Fed, LA City Council scandal in 2006. Martin Ludlow was elected in 2003. Sam Garrison becomes its communications director in 2004, 2005, and then Ludlow resigned from city council to become secretary-treasurer of the LA Fed under Miguel Contreras. And then Ludlow gets in trouble for having illegally used campaign workers and used union workers and funds, and he gets convicted in 2006.
So to wrap up your theory, Garrison leaked it in order to support his BFF, Caruso. To show that City Hall's a mess, the Latinos don't have a strong leader, the White Knight will be the champion of the Latinos. Therefore, you should hire him as mayor.
And
well, he did get more votes out of Latinos than KDL did.
He did. He got 45%. I mean, KDL tanked. KDL didn't even make 8% of the primary, barely. And then KDL never endorsed
the woman you probably voted for almost beat him.
I did not vote in the LA election, actually, because I actually live in Lawndale, outside of the city of LA.
Oh,
yeah, and I have no history of political donations or anything like that.
Great punk rock band.
This is my genuine effort as a informant to a civil rights agency who becomes aware of a felony in progress, who reports it, and I've cooperated with law enforcement too to at least try to get them to do something about this, because there's an LAPD felony investigation into this. There's a state attorney general investigation into the gerrymandering. But for the city of LA to be held in suspense for 6 months like this, and to have, I applaud the protesters who go down there and denounce KDL. But one thing I'll say is it has to be peaceful. Last week, one person was arrested for disruption and for allegedly battering a police officer.
It's not smart.
It's not smart. Like it's these tapes came out. They are ugly. What's on here is wrong.
Who was arrested?
I forget this. It was a protester. I forget his name.
Was he affiliated with anybody?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
too early to tell on that one.
Zachary,
so you got to do the investigation.
I appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you for coming here.
Yeah.
Thank you for just trying to do the right thing. Idealism is not dead.
Stay safe, stay peaceful, LA, and let's keep trying to make good things happen. Because if nobody believes in our ability to change this, to make it better, why should we have any hope or change?
Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you.
How great was Zachary? You know who has never let us down? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, Tony, Jordan, thank you for introducing us to people like Zach. Here's what I'd tip my waiter. So shout out to our Patreons: Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Granke, Ben Welsh, Jen Adams, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, Christina Up North, Robin Carey, Adam Shorn, Ben from Down Under, Chris from the ATX, and Gregor. To be a Patreon, just go to patreon.com/hereinla and give till it hurts you. Also, shout out to our Angelinos. To be an Angelino, all you gotta do is PayPal or Venmo, $25 or more, and we will list you on the Here in LA website or the Medium blog forever. Just send your hard-earned cash to busblog@gmail.com. Want to support us, but Christmas is right around the corner. You can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook. Yeah, go crazy and post too. Tweet something nice about this, and anytime you see us tweet, just retweet it. And for good's sake, tell your friends. Tell them how Here in LA is spelled, and that it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and even Spotify. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who has no comment about KDL, Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Oregon and Jordan Katz. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and the people who do the right thing when the right thing needs to be doed. Thank you, Patriots!